The Long Road to True Happiness by WierdRandomTina. Chapter 10. Hidden Fears and Hidden Talents. The last thing Branch remembered on Thursday night was climbing into bed and turning off his mushroom lamp. Now he was suddenly standing in the middle of a grassy meadow near the centre of the village. He could hear the distant noise of trolls, but he couldn't see anyone. Then he spotted Poppy, running towards him. Delighted to see her, a huge smile spread across his face. But that expression faltered when Branch realized the beautiful pink princess looked mad. When he asked her what was wrong, she yelled at him to go away. "I already told you I want nothing to do with you. You're not my friend. I'd never be friends with someone as horrible as you. I don't care about you, and you've made it pretty obvious you don't care about me." Poppy's harsh words stabbed at his heart. Why was she acting like this? Branch tried to tell her he cared about her more than anything in the whole world, but somehow the words came out of his mouth were, "I hate you." So she angrily continued on about how she hoped she'd never see him again, that he was a waste of her time, and he should just go back into his bunker and stay there. With that, Poppy turned around and left. Hurt and confused, Branch tried to chase after her, but despite her slow pace, he couldn't seem to catch up to her. She just kept walking further and further away. He shouted her name desperately, but she ignored him. His legs moved faster and faster, and yet he couldn't gain any speed, until suddenly the grassy ground gave way under him until he jolted awake. It took at least a minute for Branch to comprehend the situation. His heart was pounding, and he was struggling to catch his breath. He was laying diagonally in his bed, tangled up in his blanket, his arms and legs sprawled out in all directions, his pillow on the floor. Very slowly, he sat up, observing his surroundings. Eventually, the clock beside his bed caught his eye. It was Friday morning. He was in his bunker. There was no grassy meadow. Once he was certain it had been nothing but a stupid dream, Branch shook it off and went about his business. Changing his clothes, made his bed, got some coffee, ate breakfast. His daily morning routine. Same as always. His mind was empty. He wasn't thinking or feeling anything at all. Nothing was bothering him. That dream wasn't bothering him. He had already gotten over that dream. He had not gotten over that dream. Not one bit. Poppy's anger and hatred was still fresh in the front of his mind. Branch kept reminding himself that it didn't actually happen. It wasn't real. She would never do that to him. She would never do that to anyone. It was just another paranoid nightmare. But it made no difference. Though the context had been unrealistic, the scene had been so vivid. It targeted his fears and stirred up his insecurities. What if that's how Poppy really feels about me? She acts nice with me, but then she does with everyone and everything. All the time, no matter the circumstances. If a tarantula bit off her arm, she'd still be nice to it. It doesn't mean she likes me. She has no reason to like me. Bad dreams and nightmares were fairly common occurrences for Branch. On nights he was able to fall into a decent sleep. Even after all these years. They most often consisted of graphic reenactments of his past, and all the village being invaded by Bergens. As his admiration for Poppy grew into an actual crush, he also started experiencing scenarios where she alone was captured or hurt by an invading Bergen, while he was always powerless to help her. Reliving his childhood trauma was horrifying enough, but when Branch's dreams involved anything happening to the princess, his stomach would be in knots until he managed to catch a quick, distant glance of Magenta, or faintly hear a snippet of her cheery voice. Something to stupidly reassure himself that she truly was all right. His dreams solely revolving around Poppy were less dramatic, and the plot lines varied. In some, they were contentedly enjoying each other's company, smiling warmly at each other and chatting, often sharing lunch or going for walks while holding hands. In others, Branch would be a literal ghost to her, unable to make himself seen or heard, with her going about her days as if he had never existed. Occasionally, the opposite would happen. He'd search all over for her, but no one knew who he was talking about. But this, Poppy openly despising him and believing he despised her, was much more unnerving, made worse by the fact that they were finally beginning to get along quite well. When Poppy let herself into the bunker, she found Branch at his dining table. It only took a brief greeting for her to know that something was off about the grey and black troll. He was acting even more introverted than normal, but not in a surly way. He seemed anxious, maybe a bit uncomfortable. Poppy's instinct was to question it, but knew he'd insist he was fine, even if that wasn't true. So she opted for a different approach, acting like she didn't notice his demeanour, hoping her enthusiasm would get his mind off whatever was wrong. Poppy skipped over to stand beside Branch and presented him with a brown gift box. She had left it unpainted for him, the only decorations being paper cutouts glued to the lid, a tiny figure of her, of him, and scattered puzzle pieces. Poppy set the box down on the table in front of him. Branch looked at it for a second or two, then slowly unwrapped it, then looked over its contents. She cheerfully explained, "Your requested goodies, as promised. I couldn't decide which muffin to get for you, and Maddie had both made without icing, so I just grabbed one of each." Branch hadn't uttered a single noise since she had arrived, but though he was remaining unresponsive and avoiding eye contact, he definitely was not ignoring her. Therefore she continued, "Also, I grabbed a couple more mini maple tarts. She ran out of the plain and raisin, and one almond cookie for you to try, also free of icing. I know you didn't ask for those last two things, but I figured you deserved a prize for winning our puzzle competition. Which, by the way, I brought my own puzzle today, so this time I will triumph." Poppy had witnessed many varying reactions from Branch receiving a gift. Annoyance, disgust, no emotion at all, surprise, even a hint of light gratitude. But this time, he looked nervous. One might also say sad. Clearly, the happy distraction tactic wasn't having any effect on him. Cutting to the chase, Poppy blurted out, "What's wrong, Branch? You're acting kind of odd." The collarless troll answered with his classic, "Nothing. I'm fine." This was reminding Poppy of a familiar conversation, which hadn't gone well, and she did not want a repeat of it. She took half a minute to consider her next words, before attempting a softer, straightforward approach. "Look, Branch, I'm not trying to get all up in your private business. I'm really not. I'm only asking because you're my friend, and clearly you're not fine. So I want to help you feel better. That's all. That's what friends do." Poppy was mentally prepared for Branch to lose his temper at her again. But his voice stayed level, as he kept his gaze downward and away from her. "I'm fine. Just tired." She was not convinced. Perhaps that was part of it, but it definitely wasn't the full story. However, something about Branch's behaviour steered her away from wanting to pry. Poppy was silent for a few seconds before risking to add, "Okay then, but please remember that if anything is ever troubling you, you can always talk to me about it. I'm here for you, Branch." His pale eyes locked with her vibrant ones for a second or two. before his darted back down to the table. Poppy noticed his ears twitch a few times, and his brows furrowed as if in concentration. Soon Branch cleared his throat and said, trying to revive his gloomy tone to cover up his vulnerability, "Might as well start the puzzle."
"Sure, that sounds great."
Though he had avoided her words, Poppy was confident he had taken them in, which was all that mattered at this point. She bounced over to the couch. Branch ate one of the tarts before following. She pulled out the gently used puzzle as she got comfy, making sure to leave her reserved companion lots of space. As Poppy opened the box, Branch took a seat next to her. Right next to her. Much closer than they had ever sat. So close that his ear brushed against hers. Both trolls realized simultaneously. Out of instinct, she gave him a look of mild surprise, and he immediately apologized while shuffling away from her.
"Hey, no, it's okay,"
Poppy softly assured him.
"There's nothing to be sorry for. You know I'm fine with closeness."
Branch managed to look over at her, out of the corner of his eye. Her fuchsia eyes were warm, and her smile was small but tender. The lovely pink troll tilted her head slightly, lightly motioning for him to rejoin her. A moment passed before he tentatively moved back, though not quite near enough for their ears to accidentally touch again. An hour and a half passed as they worked on the sunny garden puzzle. For the first few minutes, both forgot that they were supposed to be keeping track of their score. Branch found it difficult to concentrate this time. He silently blamed the blinding bright colours of this puzzle as the culprit. It wasn't as if a kind-hearted and beautiful magenta princess was invading his thoughts and distracting his focus. He quickly fell behind, leaving Poppy to win by a hair stretch. She teased Branch about her victory, with him shaking his head and rolling his eyes in a casual manner. She then ended with, "Good game, Branch." Out of habit, Poppy held up her hand for a high five. It took her a second to clue in that he wasn't going to respond, but just as she was about to lower it, Branch, without thinking, briefly connected his hand to hers. He looked as surprised as Poppy did at his gesture. She was also delighted.
"Hey, you gave me a high five!"
Branch shied away a bit, muttering, "Yeah, whatever."
"I thought you didn't do high fives."
"I don't. That was by accident." Poppy snickered at his silly excuse.
No. You dropping some of the puzzle pieces onto the floor was an accident. You don't accidentally give someone a high five."
Branch gave her an exasperated glare. For once he was being truthful. Well, sort of. He had been so preoccupied with her lovely presence that it had felt natural to respond. It just kind of happened. So maybe he wasn't giving her the detailed truth, but still. However, he was having a difficult time being genuinely annoyed at her, when the wicked smirk she was flashing at him was flipping adorable. So he stood up instead. "Well, on that note, I am going to purposefully go into the kitchen and intentionally make some tea." Branch turned and left the room, but he could practically hear the increasing smirk in Poppy's sing-song voice.
"Okay, I'll be back over here, accidentally cleaning up the puzzle."
They had bickered countless times before like this. Bickering was a very common occurrence between the two of them. Everyone in the village was aware of it. Yet, this particular bout of banter was somehow different. This banter was giving Branch a warm, fuzzy feeling in his chest. The pink troll princess happily put away the puzzle, while thinking about his classic downbeat comments and dull expressions. Somehow lacked the coldness they used to give off. They were more neutral now, as if his behaviour was more out of habit and less out of trying to be purely negative. Branch pulled out 2 mugs from the cupboard, and as the pot of water began to boil, over its bubbling, he heard light footsteps somewhere behind him. Poppy had wandered into the kitchen, gazing around at all of the belongings. She had never been in his kitchen before, only ever walking past it and catching a glimpse of it. Like the rest of the bunker, It lacked colour and brightness. However, it was a quaint little area. There was his usual sturdy shelves and cupboards, a stone oven and stove, common dishes and utensils, varying wooden and ceramic jars, jugs of dried herbs, containers of nuts and seeds, a big sink, and paint brushes? Poppy's eyes caught a narrow jar by the sink, with half a dozen fine-tipped craft brushes. I didn't know you paint. Branch turned around, wondering where such an accurate but random comment could have come from, and then realised he hadn't fully cleaned up from yesterday. Oh. Turning back around to work on the tea, he answered, Sometimes. He knew that wasn't going to be the end of it. Not with Poppy.
She pressed on. When did you start painting? Where do you keep them? She spun around the room, as if they would magically appear on the walls if she looked at them hard enough. What kind of things do you paint? Animals? Scenery? I love painting, although I'm not very good at it.
Instead of answering her flurry of questions, Branch focused on finishing the tea. When he started towards her holding 2 mugs, Poppy's initial thought was that he's either very thirsty or really likes tea. But once he was standing in front of her, he wordlessly handed out one for her to take. Honestly, she hadn't felt like tea right then, and she hadn't expected him to go ahead and make her one. But there was no way Poppy would refuse anything Branch was willing to offer her. So after a second she took it.
Oh, well, thank you. This smells really good. What kind is it?
Herbal and mixed berry, with a hint of honey.
Oh, I've never heard of that before.
Poppy took a sip, and her eyes lit up.
Wow! This is really good. Is it a secret recipe of yours or something?
It's mine, but it's not a secret. I've never exactly had anyone else to make it for. I can give you the recipe if you want. It's not complicated to make.
I'd love that. Hey, speaking of secret, what about you and this mysterious painting hobby?
Branch's shoulders drooped. He was hoping the subject change to tea would distract her from the previous inquiries. Apparently Poppy wasn't as scatterbrained as she acted. It's just something I do to pass the time.
AKA your hobby. Where are they? Can I see them?
It's not like I'm an award-winning artist. They're nothing elaborate.
Poppy took a deliberate sip of her tea. I'll be the judge of that.
You won't like them.
How can you be so sure?
Because they're not your style.
So? Even if they aren't my style, it doesn't mean I can't appreciate them. Come on, just show me a few. Pretty please, with rainbow cupcake sprinkles on top.
Branch was about to suggest doing something else that was more engaging, when her hug time watch tinged. A smug grin appeared on her face, and she announced,
Either show me your artwork, or I'll hug you. Going once.
She slowly took a step towards him, with her arms spread out.
Going twice.
Branch grumbled, walking past her and down his far hallway, and ignoring Poppy's satisfied huff as she followed along. He led her past several pod-sized rooms that she didn't even know were there. She never imagined his underground home would be so extensive. One room contained all sorts of first aid supplies. It looked like a mini hospital. They turned a corner, and the next was a storage room full of carefully piled crates. Across from that one, what looked like a gym. Stone barbells and dumbbells, various punching bags, some wooden benches, some bars and hanging hoops that almost resembled a playground. Then they reached the final room at the end of the hallway. Witnessing Branch's paintings, Poppy wasn't sure how to react. Some were sloppily hung up on the walls, others were just on the floor, leaning against a wall. Most were stacked into scattered, messy piles. None were framed. But despite the poor presentation, the works themselves were highly impressive. Some were abstract, many were realistic or surrealistic, but all of them shared one trait. The attention to detail was astounding. The village's esteemed artist, a multicoloured team named Harper, would have surely approved of his skill. However, The context of the paintings was unsettling. They were all either dull and depressing, or dark and intense. Blacks and greys, muted earthy colours, some navy blues and deep blood reds. There were eerie forests, raging storms, dreary landscapes, and other similar scenes. The longer the chipper princess stayed silent, the more uncomfortable Branch became. Finally he muttered, "There, see? I told you you wouldn't like them." He almost sounded ashamed. Poppy very quickly explained, No, it's not that. You're a very talented artist. It's just, they're all so gloomy."
"Were you really expecting anything else coming from me?"
"I guess not." While the gloominess did suit him, Poppy couldn't understand why he'd choose such depressing scenes when he could paint lively forests, sunny summers, beautiful landscapes, or literally anything else. Works of art should be fun and colourful and inspiring. If she created dark things like these, it would make her feel down too. So she suggested to Branch, "You know what? You should try something else, like a blooming flower garden, or cute animals playing, or a bunch of bright butterflies flying into a sunny sky. If you paint happier things, then you'll feel happier too."
"Thanks for the advice. I'll get right on that."
Branch didn't really care whether or not Poppy picked up on his biting sarcasm. Because, either way, she said no more. If only he could tell her that not all his paintings were gloomy. Only the ones he was willing to let her see. Hidden away in a box under his bed were a dozen brightly coloured and lovely paintings of the princess herself. They used to be hung up on the now empty back wall, encased in nice maple frames. But the day after Branch relocated his card collection, he decided it would be a smart choice to hide the paintings as well.
Good call. Stumbling across those would have been even more mortifying than finding the invitations.
Poppy figured he wasn't actually planning on listening to her advice, recognizing the lack of enthusiasm in his should-be-enthusiastic words. But she was only trying to help. How's he supposed to be happy when he's surrounded by all these negative images? Oh well, we'll work on that eventually. Maybe I'll bring him some paints that are nice leafy greens and sunny yellows and sky blues once he opens up a bit more, and we can paint together. Though my paintings will look pretty sad next to his." As the pretty pink troll took a closer look at a small hanging painting nearby, she noticed Branch glancing at her one arm. Again. She'd caught him doing so several times during the visit, but thought it was most likely coincidental. Now she was sure it was intentional. Branch hadn't questioned Poppy about her injured arm for several visits now, as it seemed to be improving steadily. This was the first time, though, he'd seen it without a bandage. The vast scrape had healed up very well, replaced with a barely visible pale magenta scar that'll probably fade in a few months. He'd been wanting to figure out something to say, but in the end not needing to, as Poppy must have seen him looking. "Yeah, I took the bandages off for good last night. I left them on an extra day, just to make sure it was closed up properly. That ointment stuff of yours works wonders. Speaking of that, I still have a bit left and half the roll of bandages. Would you like them back?"
"Nah, I have plenty. Keep them with you. Though, hopefully, you won't need them again."
His last sentence held a stern note, reminding her of why she needed them in the first place. Poppy put a shy hand behind her head. "Yeah, I don't think I'll do something like that a second time." Though, if she was being honest with herself, as bizarre as it sounded, she would gladly scrape up her other arm, if it meant Branch would pay her such compassionate attention again. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. A nice calm one, that one. And this thing with Branch's crush, when I first read it, I almost thought it was creepy. But painting is self-expression. I won't go into too many details, but I know several artists and painters, and what they can do with images is nothing short of incredible. And I like the idea of Branch expressing himself through painting. And on that note, I think Poppy's got it backwards. He's not painting the scenes and it's making him miserable. He's painting the scenes to express his misery. It's a way for him to vent through something that wasn't verbal. And I can respect that. Sometimes, if I've had a bad day at work, when I was doing the Empire of Ice and Fire by Longclaw 1-6, I would do a battle chapter after I'd had a stressful day at work, because nothing was better after dealing with customers I didn't like than yelling swear words into this microphone for half an hour in funny voices. Let me tell you, it's a great stress relief. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and all binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Bye!